All right, it is now officially 2 p.m. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Salaam alaikum, and welcome. You are. All right, it is now officially 2 p.m. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Salaam alaikum, and welcome. You are. All right, it is now officially 2. Yeah, I'm glad we did that now. That had to do with the YouTube live, I believe. Give us a minute. I'm going to ask for. Thank you for all of you who are on and joining us. Welcome. If you could give us a few moments, we are working out a little bit of a tech issue and we will get started very shortly.
Chat box on रखो ना इसके ऊपर. Okay, it's fine. हमारा वजन लेवल सही है. पूछ रहा हूँ. I want to ask her, but she's on the phone.
She's on the phone. It's okay.
Okay, we are going to try this again. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our Being Your Best, or Being My Best, excuse me, seminar series. This is our 4th seminar in this series. This is our first one that we're doing via webinar. So right up in advance, I am going to do 2 things. One is to ask you for your patience. We are navigating this for the first time. Hopefully we won't have any technical glitches, but if we do, hang out, stay with us. The second, I ask for forgiveness for those same technical glitches. So if you will just hang on, and inshallah, we won't have any of those, but in case we do ask for your forgiveness and patience. Today, our webinar is on anger management while we are in this unique and current situation. Many of us are for the first time together with our families, our schedules have been altered, our world has been turned upside down. And we've been hearing a lot about coping with stress and anxiety, but another natural feeling we have is anger. And so our Being My Best is mission has been just basically for our community, right? Our community members, as American Muslims, we face unique challenges in preserving our Islamic values while attaining success in the world we live in, right? And as we strive for success in our careers, education, family life, relationships, self-fulfillment, financial growth, etc., we sometimes find ourselves at a lack of resources that speak specifically to us. So the mission of Being My Best is to empower our community members by providing resources and tools to help them on their path to success. Now, as we're getting started, I wanted to go through a few of the housekeeping on how this Zoom webinar will work. So all of you as our attendees, it is great to see you on here. We are doing, so here's how it's going to work. If you're an attendee, we cannot see you on video, so don't worry if you do have to go run and grab your hijab or make sure you're wearing beautiful clothes, which I'm sure you all are. We will not see you. Another thing that will also happen, just to help us with background noise, we will not hear you either. So you can only see and hear us. We will not see and hear you, but we want this to be interactive. We want you to communicate with us. So there's 2 ways you can communicate with us. On the screen, if you are on a computer, on the bottom of the screen, a little bar will pop up. On that bar, you will see a few icons. One of them is the Q&A. Now, we'll have our 2 speakers present, and then you are able throughout the seminar to ask questions. Now, I may save some of those questions till the end, most of them. And there's another option is also there's a chat box. I'm going to ask you not to put questions in there, but if you have comments or something else you'd like for me to see, you can put that in the chat box as well. And I will do my best while I'm moderating to monitor both. If you do have questions, please, if a question comes up while the speakers are talking, even if it's not a Q&A portion, I want you to click on that little Q&A box, put your question in there, and we will do our best to get to all those questions before the end. And if time does run out, no problem. We will get to them later. Another quick thing I wanted to bring your attention to is on the Baitul Ilm website, and I'll wait till the end of the seminar to actually physically show you this, but we have a section on the homepage for COVID-19 resources. Oh, I see some of you are raising your hand. I will not be, unless I ask you all to raise your hands for a question, I will not be unmuting you when you raise your hand. So that is a function, you can play with it, but I'm just gonna lower all hands. So as I was getting back to the website, on the website, on our main page, we have coronavirus resources, or I think it's COVID-19 resources. If you click on that tab, it'll take you to a link, go to that link, and you'll see financial and economic resources, health resources, including mental health resources, legal resources, and spiritual ones, right? Different links to Quran and du'as and things that can help us during this time. So I will show you at the end of the seminar, for those who want to stay on, how to access that resource page. And I'm really grateful to all our volunteers on the Being My Best and Outreach Committee, namely my counterpart, Brother Laith Ali, our chairman, Jawad Hussain, Dr. Irfan Ali, as well as two of our younger volunteers, Owen Hussain and Fiza Shirazi. So they were all a part of making that list happen, and today's seminar, as well as all the ones we've been having. With that, I think it's time, and if you have questions on how this webinar will work, we can have them in the chat box. I see here there's a comment that you're hearing an echo on my voice. Is that accurate? Is there an echo? If there's an echo, please let me know. Just you can go in the chat box and let me know, and I will play with my audio to change that and make sure that's not happening anymore. Okay, with that, okay, good. I'm getting no echo. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm also going to do one more quick thing as we start this meeting. I am going to start recording this. So if those of you who have signed up, we can send you a link to this afterwards too, if you want to refer back to the slides as well. Okay, now let's get to the real important thing. Well, who we actually want to hear from. You don't want to hear me talking. That's not fun. We want to hear our speaker. So let me introduce both of our speakers who will be talking about anger management in the time of sheltering in place and these unique circumstances we are in. Our two speakers, this is a unique duo we have. They are a married couple, Doctors Yasmeen and Asif Khan. Dr. Yasmeen Khan is a licensed clinical psychologist with a specialization in cross-cultural clinical psychology. She received her degree in clinical psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. She has certification in clinical hypnosis and extensive training in internal family systems therapy model. Dr. Khan has extensive experience working with children, adolescents, and adults using many, many modalities, which is fantastic. She supervised community mental health programs, taught graduate level classes, and she's done many of these teaching workshops. So we're in for a little bit of a treat. She's also a founder and director of the Self-Empowerment Center, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing mental health awareness, knowledge transfer, and clinical services to Pakistan. So not only is she a clinical psychologist, but she's also taking that mission even further and helping people abroad. Her husband, Dr. Asif Khan, is a doctor of psychology with multicultural proficiency, extensive experience in individual, couple, and group psychotherapy, and standardized psychological testing at community mental health centers, along with medical and educational institutions, forensic settings, and in private practice. As director of psychology, he has developed and implemented treatment programs for inpatient and outpatient services at psychiatric hospitals. He served as adjunct faculty in graduate and doctoral programs in Chicago, and developed and supervised training programs. And with that, before I let them start speaking, I know I promised that I would stop speaking and I would allow you guys to hear from our speakers. But before we get that started, I want to interact with you a little bit, I want to share with all of you a poll. Now, when I launch this poll, you will see a question on the screen. If you can choose one of the multiple choice questions, that would be great. So our first poll is, since sheltering in place, I feel anger rise, and you can choose every single day, every so often, or never. I'm cool as a cucumber. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to get those answers in for us. Okay. We'll give it 10 more seconds. Thank you for participating. We appreciate it. Wow, we have a really calm group. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now. And so we can see there that only 10% of us are getting angry every single day. I wasn't allowed to vote in the poll, but I think I fall into that category. 63% every so often, and a good 27% of you are never. You're cool as a cucumber. So for those individuals, I would love to figure out how you do that. And maybe with the help of the Doctors Khan and talking to you, we'll figure this out. But yeah, so what do we think, Doctors Khan?
Amazing. It's very impressive.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Well,
I am totally not surprised. So yeah, let's start talking about the definition of anger, and then we'll come back to, how did we get these results?
okay,
Right?
makes sense. Yes.
Okay.
First of all, assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining in.
Can I say salam?
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli.
All right, so let's get started with how we define anger. First of all, anger is not a pure emotion. It's not a primary emotion. It's a combination of a range of emotions that we all experience globally, universally, in different situations. Yes, anger is definitely not desirable or acceptable in social interaction, but still, it's something that is part of human nature. And the range of emotions that are masked or covered by anger varies from person to person, situation to situation, and time to time. So it could be just being angry, apparently, but trying to mask feelings of helplessness, which certainly ties into the current situation. Everybody's feeling helpless, no end in sight apparently, and feeling just having no control. And that is something very, unsettling for most of us. It could be a grief reaction when people are grieving for a loss, and we are grieving for loss of earnings, livelihood, social life. So that is also rolled into a combined experience, all-inclusive experience that we are going through at this point. It could be also just sadness. And anger is actually, depression is considered anger turned inwards.
Could be,
it could
right?
be in a number of situations, not across the board. Yes.
Yeah.
So anger is basically a global expression of disapproval and a response of feeling threatened by someone or something in our environment, again, like we are dealing with the situation as now.
So the expressions of anger could be, and that's why I'm not surprised at these results, because there are so many. Yeah. Can we go to the next slide here?
Yeah, I think before we get into the expressions of anger, I want to do one more poll of the audience if possible.
Sure.
Let's see if I can get to the second one. Yep, I think I can. All right. This is the next poll. I'm going to launch it. So if everybody can participate for us one more time. On this one, the question is, what am I most likely to do when I get angry? And the choices are raise my voice, roll my eyes, make a calm request, make a sarcastic comment, or none of these. So we'll give them about 20 seconds to answer, 30 seconds. So it's funny, as I'm looking at these choices, personally, I think I start with the calm request. Then, when nobody listens or my point is not made, I go to the sarcastic comment. And eventually, I think 9 times out of 10, I get to the point where I raise my voice. All right, so I think, people are still putting in results. I am going to stop sharing in about 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and the poll, here are results. So we see 71%, yes, they fall into my ballpark. they raise their voice.
Yeah.
13% roll eyes, 19% make a calm request, 26% make a sarcastic comment. I think that's my one of my favorite things to do, which is not good.
Yes.
And 16% are angels and don't do any of these things.
Yeah. So not surprising. That
Yeah.
is not surprising. So you see, it's a good segue into what we're going to talk about next. Is their expressions of anger are could be very different, very varied, like a grumpy grandfather or a toddler having a tantrum, or you're yelling at the TV because your favorite team did not win, or you're ignoring your teenager, or you're doing a protest march. Those are all differences in expression, and these differences have to do with so many different things. It could be a personality, socialization, accept what's accepted in the community, what's accepted in the social sphere or not, and the gender differences, right? Okay. So the expressions of anger can be aggressive, assertive, passive. Yes. Yeah. So what? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So
yeah, go ahead.
no, sorry, I didn't want to. Okay, so the aggressive anger, like Hina, you were saying, you may start with a very calm voice, and then you gradually, may raise your voice. We can go to the next slide, and then, because if one thing doesn't work, you may try other things, and it could be a progressive escalation. Or it could get to the explosive level. So depending on your level of frustration or your coping skills, different personality styles, and also who you are with,
Yes, that makes a lot of
right?
sense.
That makes
Sure.
that's what it is. And then
Right.
the passive anger is you deal by not dealing. You can keep your feelings inside, but then there is a risk that you're suppressing your feelings, and you may, like you were talking about depression, as if that
Yeah.
could lead to that. Or you make those sassy comments, hold grudges, rumors, sarcasm. So let me give you an example. An example is, I'm not going to use our example, as if, so don't
Okay.
worry about it.
Okay.
Khalid and Maria are watching TV. So Khalid has been waiting for this TV show to air for several weeks, and Maria asks him if he wants to watch this movie that Maria has chosen, and he agrees to watch the movie. So what happens is that he wants to please Maria, and that's very nice of him. But he's feeling some frustration. He doesn't express it, and he holds it inside because he doesn't want to argue. Later, Maria asks him a question about his work, and he sulks. And Maria is like, where did that come from? She doesn't get it. And she asks him what is wrong. And
Hmm.
so what is happening is that Khalid is expressing his anger in a passive way.
Right. So then that's one way to do it. Then there's assertive way to express your anger, which is, it's not suppressed. Suppression would be totally passive,
Mhm.
but assertive could be just, calm and controlled. You're still angry and you know that you're angry, but you can still monitor your own behavior, your own body language, your own, voice, tone, everything, facial expressions, and stay calm and maintain uh, as much calmness as possible in the situation.
So it's
And
more controlled and clear
and direct.
and direct.
Ed,
But it's hard.
it is
I
very,
find it
yeah, it's
very
much
hard to
easier
do.
said than done, but there's a function it serves, and that is, it allows us to set limits with other people, and they know things that they can or they cannot, do, or lines that they cannot cross.
So for, personally, that's very hard for me to do, because I think it's because of my socializing and my gender, and I find it very similar,
Mhm.
with my friends who are from this from our cultural background. It was not encouraged when I was growing up. Not
That's the
encouraged.
cultural piece.
Yeah, that's the cultural and gender piece. So should we talk about, okay, how anger could be a secondary emotion?
Yes, of course. So anger, as I explained earlier, is not a primary or a pure emotion. It masks a range of different emotions. So people can be angry because they are sad. For example, when we lose somebody, we are grieving, and an important aspect of grieving a grievance process is just feeling angry. Maybe we're angry at God or angry at the incident that happened or somebody died. Another way to be angry is just like current situation, feeling helpless, which is not as much feeling lost but helpless. And loss is a secondary component to it because loss of wages and everything. But at the same time, it could be, because of sadness. So these are all different levels why, we can, experience the wide range of emotions and express it via anger. However, anger serves a very amazing function. It energizes us. It gives us this sense of control and power, and we all love to feel in control. So it also allows us to have this ability to fight the situation, not necessarily flight, but fight the situation in terms of, you know, uh, deal with the situation, come up with possible solutions.
How does this happen? What does the brain? Let's talk about the brain and the body and physiologically. What does the brain do? Yeah.
Yeah, so anger is a psychophysiological experience, which means our mind and body are equally engaged and involved in the whole process of experience of an anger episode. So what happens that, for example, major, vital signs change, and they're very noticeable, not only to us but also others, like increase in blood pressure, we can feel it, increase in heart rate, we can feel it, tingling sensations we can experience, muscle tension is totally noticeable by others as well. And if you flush face, that's of course obvious. People can just look at your face and say, "Hey, you look angry" or something.
Yeah, so in Urdu there is this term, garam dimag, ya garmi chad gayi. It is
Yeah,
actually garam, right? It is a hot emotion. You actually feel hot
very
because of
true.
all these physiological changes that are happening.
Certainly, people even experience and report that some people even feel they start sweating when they're angry. I mean,
Mm.
but again, all these symptoms that you see on the screen are not always present in this in one person at the same time. They may vary from person to person or in severity as well.
You see, and what's interesting is that it's your brain body working together, and it is actually a protector. It
Right.
is there. It is a survival instinct for you. So it works as a protector because the brain signals the body. And you know what's very interesting is that these are the same physiological changes, as if the ones you were describing, that
Yeah.
happens in anxiety and stress.
Yeah.
The blood pressure, the
Very true.
hormones, because what's common is that the brain is signaling the body that there is danger. Do something to preserve yourself. So then actually, your blood is flowing into your hands so you can strike an enemy or you can hold a weapon, and those hormones that are releasing in your body, those adrenaline, you get this surge of energy to take the action. So it's a very, very
Yeah.
important
Can I make a
emotion.
comment?
Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So as you just said, you're right. It's in part of the definition was anger is a global response uh, to a perceived threat. So the one thing important here, I would like to say, threat is real, anger is a choice or is an option. So yes, we will always be faced, in different life situations, whether it's about work or about our personal safety or the situation we're dealing with right now. So threat is real, but anger is an option, which means we don't have to respond with anger. And that's, of course, it takes time and ability to reflect and be mindful of our own
So I
reaction.
want to piggyback on what you said.
Yeah.
Anger is an option, and the expression of anger is also an option. See, there is this saying, anger, gussa haram.
Right.
So is it really haram? Is the experience, if you're saying that anger is a natural emotion, it's a basic emotion, even though it's a complex emotion and everybody experiences it, so then how come it's
I
haram?
think the haram, to my definition, my understanding, the way I would define it is haram is not anger. It cannot be haram is because it's a normal, universal human emotion. It's what do we
See.
do with the anger? Because
Mm.
anger could be very destructive. If you look all around us, all the crimes, at some point, anger is involved. Even terrorism, people say the most driving force behind terrorism is anger itself. So anger could be very destructive or deadly. So I think that's where it's haram and it starts to hurt other people, and that's the boundary or the line I would draw in terms of how we manage it.
So it's how you manage it and how long it lasts if it's prolonged,
Yeah.
right? And what are you using it for?
Yeah, of course, prolonged state of mind and body, because it's a state of mind and body both, that can lead to major medical conditions like high blood pressure, heart
Dr.
condition.
Scott, can I interrupt just for a moment? I have a really great question before we go into
Okay.
those physical things.
Yeah.
Because we just went through the different forms of anger, right? We went through the passive, the aggressive, and assertive. And I have a great question here. Is one way of expressing anger better than another? It seems to me that the assertive anger was the most constructive.
Yes, of
It
course.
is the most constructive because you're not suppressing your feelings. You are taking action, but in a way that it will bring about change. That's the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
But I find I struggle with that. It is very hard for me. I work on it every day to, because I feel like it's harder because we're not, the women are not trained as much
As much to what?
to
Or
express
to
their
express anger.
anger.
Culturally,
We are,
yeah.
we are actually rumors and sarcasm and rolling the eye, all the
So
non-physiological.
more of those passive
Yeah.
type anger. Yeah, I
Culturally
think
encouraged for women to be
That is-
passive.
unfortunately we've been pinned into these gender roles, and
Yeah.
sometimes the upbringing might lead to that. And maybe it's looked more for the men or males to be more of the aggressive, I'm sorry,
Right.
and accepting of that. And it might be you're a little bit of both, no matter what your gender is, but I can see how culture and upbringing can cause one more than the other. So you're saying that the assertive is the way you want to channel your anger.
Good thing about assertive is, I mean, ideally, assertive expression of anger is something that does not hurt you and that does not hurt others. Aggressive anger or expression hurt other people, and passive hurts you internally, though. Although it's may not be visible, but that's what makes assertive way of expression much more socially adaptable.
But also to answer your question, Hina, it also depends what is adaptive, what is working.
Yes, yes.
So if you are interacting with somebody and that person doesn't listen to you until you yell at the person or scream or throw something, then you're not going to be assertive with that person.
Just like any other emotion is a progressive escalation, anger, of course, is very progressive in nature. It starts with, as we have talked about earlier, yelling, screaming, and then it may at some point turn to physical towards objects, and eventually, it may be hurting other people, which can cause domestic violence and contribute to domestic violence.
So is anger, is the domestic violence because of anger?
It's more about control.
So it's misunderstood a lot, because a lot of people, when they justify the domestic violence, it would be, I did it out of anger.
I think it's because some people develop this anger could be addictive, honestly, because some people are reinforced, or it is so comforting to a lot of some people that it could become their preferred way of managing their environment, people, their situations, their problems, and because it gives them this pseudo sense of control, false sense of control, so it becomes more or less habitual. But also it is rewarding because they feel in control, and that's a classic way of operation for men, mostly men, in domestic violence situations, because it is very comforting and soothing for them to feel in charge, and at the cost of their marriage relationship.
So somebody asked a very good question. Should I just read the question?
Well, you know what? Maybe we go on with this part of the presentation, and please keep your questions coming in. You have the option if you go into the Q&A box, you can click if you don't want us to know your name, you can click anonymous, and you can put the questions in that way. We recommend I see some that came in the chat too, which I think are great questions as well. It's better to put it into the Q&A, but I will check the chat as well. Okay, so we're going on to the prolonged anger and what that could lead to.
Anger
I'm going to wrap up the prolonged anger, this slide, basically just by saying that yes, it has definitely psychological and social and physiological consequences. I already mentioned about medical conditions. Also, it damages relationships, that leads to divorce, fights, arguments, and definitely, sometimes abuse, of course, as we just talked about domestic violence. Also in anger, one thing that happens, we lose the faculty of reasoning. There's no logic, there's no understanding. We are just basically reacting to somebody. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. And in that mode of operation, we may say or do things that you may regret, and because we can't just take them back or undo them.
So the reason the faculty, so you're not reasoning, is because the part of the brain that is responding to that danger signal is gets into that survival mode,
Right,
the
right.
fight
That's
or
true.
flight, self-preservation. And when you are in that mode, the complex centers of the brain, the centers of the brain that are responsible for judgment, reasoning, logic,
They're turned off
they're turned
temporarily.
off
Right, right.
because you have more important things to do to preserve yourself.
Yep.
So when you are in that very heightened state of anger, it is very difficult to use proper judgment or logic.
Right. Okay. I would like to just also, this is food for thought. I mean, this is something for all of us. We should always ask ourselves, how feel do I get angry? And when I feel angry, does it seem like it could be out of control? Also, is anger impacting my relationships? Is it hurting others? And is it going to cause me to say or do things that I may regret? Or is it also crossing the lines in terms of verbal, physical abuse and all that? This is something that is good for us to reflect upon.
Mhm.
And I just wanted, yeah, go ahead. You want to say something?
So, yeah. So then, if we reflect upon this and we know that there is anger, how to work with anger? So, the
Yes.
most important thing to work with anger is that identify. The first thing I do with my clients is, kind of help them pause and feel, like be in the moment. See, okay, so identify the primary emotion, the root cause. Because you were saying anger is a complex emotion, let's identify what's underneath the anger and identify that primary emotion, and then figure out, once the primary emotion, you figure it out, sadness, fear, frustration, disappointment, hurt, whatever it is, then the thoughts that are causing that emotion. So because the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors, they're all connected to each other. Nothing happens in a vacuum. It's easy to identify the thoughts and to change the thoughts. And then remember, the shift can be very fast and it can be unconscious. It's important to deal with the primary issue. That's the most important thing. Should we talk about COVID and anger before we run out of time?
Yes, definitely. One thing that COVID has done, uh, is it has turned our lives upside down globally, and there's a combination of different contributing factors. Because so far we're talking about, well, are we angry because somebody died? Are we angry because somebody hit, us from the behind in a road accident or something? It could be anything of those, or just because we are sick. But here, anger is causing so many things at different levels. Social life is at standstill. Of course, there's nothing happening. People have lost their loved ones. Of course, a lot of people have died, hundreds of thousands. Second is another is like we have lost our livelihood. So there is a combination of grief, combination of fear, what lies ahead, and combination of sadness about what we have already lost. So this is like a tsunami of factors that are contributing to anger in this COVID-related situation now.
And that makes you feel helpless, vulnerable, loss of control. You want
Yes.
to have some control in your life. Actually, anger does give you a feeling of control because you can do something about it.
Yeah. And speaking of doing something about it, one thing I was saying that what we do on a regular basis under normal circumstances is we have a routine. We have
Yeah.
time to go to work. We have a time to, eat. We have time to for social life and all that, and we plan things and vacation. None of that is happening now. So we feel like life is there, basically not stable. The routine is not there. Routine has an implicit sense of stability and security. So everybody's feeling insecure. So that's another thing that is causing this. So one thing we can do is we can maintain routines. Like we can set a time, which is much easier said than done again, but we can set a time to get up, log on to our computers if you're working from home. And that's for the lucky ones who still have a job, honestly. And then also,
Yeah.
limit our exposure to the media, because we are being fed all this toxic and news information. Everything is bleak and nothing is at this point giving us hope, and it's just challenging. It's like uphill battle. So we need to cut down on exposure to media. What I have done for myself, I just set aside 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, and no other time for news because it's just very toxic and it brings us down. So that's one thing. I would certainly say that fantasy escape, which I would define as reading books, watching a movie or series of movies, or something that was on your bucket list and you never got to it. This is a good time to catch up on that. Connections, very important. We should keep in touch with our, family, friends, even people we haven't called like in years. It's a good time to just check on their well-being. It gives a sense of connection, sense of belongingness, and this sense of support that we have this system.
Yeah, and some of the other things is that again, it's everybody has a different threshold. Some people may want to watch more news than others, and that's
Right.
okay.
True.
We all have our own thresholds. I feel like my threshold keeps changing. In the beginning, I was watching a lot more news, and then as time is passing, some days actually, and my threshold changes every day. Some days I decide I'm going to watch more. Some days, we need to be aware. It keeps changing. It's not like, WhatsApp messages. Oh, yes. These WhatsApp messages, they're all kinds of messages. In these WhatsApp messages, have you found cures for COVID? Like people are, yeah, there is all kinds of stuff.
That's what they're saying. Maybe there are 100,000 or maybe a million, people affected by this virus, but maybe there are 10 million experts all of a sudden and just sending
Yeah.
all these messages to the
Yeah,
masses.
and it's the control and the lack of control. I love that concept about control and lack of control, because one way, this is how we manage stress. Figure out, it's the serenity prayer. Figure out what you cannot control, because right now there's a lot of stuff that we cannot control. Like you were saying, as if lives have turned upside down. But within that, is there some things we can control? For example, what time we're waking up, how much sleep we are getting, what we are eating, not eating. We can go
Exercise.
for exercise, for walks. So there are still some things that are in the realm of control. So accept what you cannot control, and utilize your choices what you can control, even though it is short. Um, there is a concept, sabr and shukr, in Islam, and it is such a well-researched concept. What is sabr is acceptance, right? There is this whole theory of psychology based on that. Acceptance and
The
commitment
ACT.
therapy, ACT. It is based on that, And then shukr is gratitude. So there has been so much research, is people keeping a gratitude journal every day. When you wake up in the morning or before you go to sleep, think of 3 things that you are grateful for today. So people who keep a gratitude journal are happier people. Why? Because it kind of changes your mindset. It brings you a shift. And in the Quran, the concept of sabr and shukr always come together. You know why? Because sabr is a prerequisite of shukr. Acceptance is a prerequisite of gratitude.
Another thing is one point I would
Mhm.
like to make. One point is about
Oh,
volunteering.
oh yes,
When we are
volunteering.
hurting,
Mhm.
and we are all hurting in at so many different levels, it's interesting and it's very amazing just to see that by other people hurting, if we start helping other people
Mhm.
hurting in this situation, if we start
Yeah.
helping them like by volunteering to different causes, different situations, whether it's about feeding the hungry or trying to raise funds to provide PPEs, masks and gloves and all that, it really helps us spiritually as well, and it also helps us emotionally, psychologically, because we feel like we are being part of the solution, not part of the problem. At least we are doing something in our capacity, and it gives us whatever level of control. It does make us feel like yes, we can do something about it instead of feeling totally
Yeah,
helpless.
so it shifts the focus from yourself
Be
or
seeing
feeling
us as a
sorry for
victim. Yeah.
yourself and the victim identity into that. And that's what your series is doing. You guys are doing this series on Ahsan is a concept in Islam, the excellence. So Islam is all about excelling in your character, in your morals. And one more thing is meditation
Oh yeah, very
or
true.
mindfulness.
Or yoga.
And so people have different ways. In our religion, it's already built in. When you are centering yourself over and over again 5 times a day and you're praying, that is coming into the present. Whatever you're
Right.
doing, you stop everything, you come and pray. It is centering. It is a kind of meditation and mindfulness, depending on how you're using it.
Right.
Should we open up to questions?
I think.
Yeah, so I think this is really helpful, kind of getting through everything. I do also want to share that both Dr. Yasmeen Khan and Dr. Asif Khan have offered to share their information with you as well if you were in need of individual help or would like to seek some guidance. And I wanted to put their information up there. Yes, we do have a lot of great questions. I am going to stop the screen share for a little bit so we can focus on it. And if you do have questions, that Q&A icon on the bottom, we have about 20 minutes left. We will try to get to as many questions as possible. And I know both Dr. Yasmeen and Asif Khan have also offered to stay on for a few more minutes afterwards to help get through the questions. So we appreciate that. There's been a lot of information and a lot of great questions. So I'm going to stop the screen share. That way my face becomes really big on your screen, which I don't love, but that's okay. We will get through it. So the first question I have here is, can anger be hereditary? We hear the expression often that he, she gets angry like his or her father or mother. So is it hereditary?
Yes, psychologically, it can be totally hereditary, but not in a genetic sense, more so in a social sense, because it's all about learning through observation. I have seen patients in my office who would say, oh yeah, I have a problem. I have people tell me I have an explosive personality. And you know what? This is what I grew up with. I saw my dad doing the same thing, or beating up my mom, or throwing objects. So I guess it's gotta be okay, but this is who I am. So hereditary in that sense, that it transfers through generations just by learning certain way of operating in your environment. I don't know if it's really genetic in the biological sense, unlike alcoholism and diabetes and all those. But yes, it could be transmitted through generations.
However, I want to add to your point that anxiety could have a genetic component, depression can have a genetic component, and sometimes the way to deal with anxiety and expression of anxiety could be in the form of anger. So your depression can be in a form of anger too, right?
True.
Turning inwards or turning outwards. So that could have a genetic component, but there is a lot of socializing and learned behaviors as well.
Great. So it's, you're saying that you can, because of your environmental factors, that's how, along with any other underlying issues.
Growing up, we learn to manage, handle, or cope with stressors just by being angry. And so that's something that transmits through generations by behaviors.
Okay, so our next question here is, what is recommended when having to interact with a coworker or family member who doesn't listen regardless of how anger is expressed, but one has to work with them?
Very good question. So in that, do you want to answer?
Why don't you go ahead and answer?
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So, there are ways of using effective communication strategies. And there is a very good, you could Google it, it's called strategies called nonviolent communication. And what it is that if you are talking to somebody, you use the language, just kind of an I language. And I'll, quickly tell you, when you fill in the blanks, I feel blank because blank. My request to you is blank. This is kind of the structure when we do the nonviolent communication. So basically,
example,
so you want me to?
When you don't listen to me, for example, like in this very relevant
No,
example.
you need to be very specific. Asif, when I asked you to turn the TV off and you ignored me, and you did not turn it off and you continued that, I felt unheard or ignored because I had told you, that this was dinner time or whatever. So what happens in that kind of communication is that you're talking about yourself. I felt this.
It doesn't sound like accusatory.
It does not sound like accusatory. When we are talking to somebody, it sounds accusatory. It's like pointing your finger. You always do this. Or you never turn the TV off. You're always on the TV when it's dinner time.
What's wrong with you? Kind of thing.
Yeah, what's wrong with you? Then the person gets the person feels attacked, and when they feel attacked, they will either attack you back or they will get defensive. And you want to take that
Right.
away.
Yeah. And I would like to add to what to respond to the question. Yes. And time again, we will encounter these situations where, someone else is getting angry and it's not getting better. So yes, one thing is the angry person. If I'm angry at somebody and I am not dealing with any logic, any reasoning, my only purpose is to get into power struggle at any level, even physical. And if I will keep pushing their buttons, keep triggering them, and this is what happens. So if I am in sound mind and calm enough, I would know that two wrongs never make a right. Plus, the getting into power struggle has never solved any problem, and it never will. So best way to do that is avoid the situation. I would rather remove myself and say this is not the right time to even address this issue, because both of us have to be in calm mind, and you seem like at this point you cannot do that, which is okay. When we can do it, we'll revisit the issue again. And that's one way to handle it, because there's no point in get locked, locking your horns and then just getting into butting heads with each other.
Yeah, we can go on, and it's such a great question.
But we have many questions to get to. So I will say that does help. It's ways to diffuse the situation, right? Either by making it about you rather than them, and then to make sure everybody's in sound mind when having that conversation.
Yeah. Google nonviolent communication.
Yeah. So we have another question here. It says, the speakers mentioned the expression of anger is dependent on the wanted response that the other party expresses. For example, I yell and I get what I want. Mm-hmm. With long-term relationships, these expressions become ingrained, and the first step taken and ultimately becoming damaging to the relationship. For example, like I yell at my kid and she'll always listen. So why should I stop? What strategies can you use to help you get what you want by being assertive instead of being that aggressive? Mm-hmm. Are we thinking about this incorrectly?
Yeah, that's a very good point. You have used certain strategies, and of course, you are
they have worked well. Anger has worked well.
Anger works very well because it evokes a fear response, and especially with somebody who is in a vulnerable situation. So if you have a child and you want something done, right, if you yell or scream, you can get it done very fast compared to making a nice polite request,
but the question
because it will evoke fear in the child. What is your purpose? Think about it. What is your purpose? You want your child or your spouse to listen to you because they're afraid of you? What would be the long-term consequences of that?
Avoidance, of course.
Then they will avoid you. And plus, with children, you want them to internalize certain values.
Right.
Remember that client, Asif had a client, his dad woke him up for Fajr by slapping him every day.
Yeah. And that's a memory that he has growing up. And he's 18 now, and he said, I don't even know if I want to follow Islam, because it just turned him so against, it's Islam itself. And it's a sad thing. But again, what I'm saying, that this is a good example and a consequence of long-term consequence of how people do that. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, anger could become part of a personality because it has worked well, but then we are paying serious,
and it continues to work well. So yeah, that client of yours, he prayed,
but at a huge cost.
He kept praying every morning. He would wake up for prayers because he was so afraid of his father.
Yes.
But then we want these morals and these values or these behaviors to be internalized, not based on fear, but based on that the person genuinely values you or cares about you or respects you for whatever the reasons. So think about it, what is your ultimate goal in getting another person to act the way they're acting?
Listen to you,
So even if anger is effective, the long term, there are no long term benefits to that, right? We want to create an environment of getting people to act in the appropriate manner, but maybe through affection and love rather than anger.
Yeah, and I have the same approach towards religion itself. I mean, why do we have to pray and do give fast and pay zakat and hajj and everything because we are afraid of Allah? Why can't we do it because we love Allah?
And that's how it should be, right? There should be that love of Allah.
Yes.
So we have many great questions. The next one is, sometimes we don't always scream or get loud when we get angry, but we show it on our face. Is there a way to control that?
Do you want to control that?
Well, if people can look at me and see the anger on my face and it's causing fear, we don't want that, right?
Yeah.
Or people getting upset, or if it's affecting my relationships.
So if you're aware that your face is showing that anger, then again, you pause and you ask yourself, what is it that I'm really feeling? And can I express that? What is my underlying primary emotion? Would it be safe for me to express it right now?
Yeah.
Can I use my words?
So stop, pause, rethink, and reassess, and try to approach it again.
Stop, pause, think. Actually, it's a name of a game. Stop, pause, think.
When you talk about Prophet ﷺ and hadith, how you change your posture, things like that,
Oh yeah, so there is that hadith, right? So when we were speaking yesterday too, we said, the hadith tells us that if you're sitting, or stand up. If you're standing, sit down. Drink water, eat grapes, things to change your physical.
That's right, because anger it's when we are in angry mindset, we are locked into this mindset neurologically as well. So the whole idea behind changing posture, removing yourself, walking away, drinking water, is you need to break that cycle, and you need to unlock that more of existence in those moments. So it helps to to relieve your anger, and it does subside if we just shift our focus from being angry to doing something else.
So the brain body feedback loop that we kind of breaking
down. We need to break that loop, yes.
Yeah. So our next question here is, how do you help children cope with anger?
Oh, cool. No, that's my my favorite movie. I recommend it watching all ages, but especially for kids, is the Inside Out movie.
Oh, I love that movie. That's fantastic.
That's something. So we teach children to express their anger, be able to express, again, like what we're talking about, assertiveness. We teach them to identify the anger. You see in that movie, the anger is bright red, and it has that face, that expression. So you can help them identify that anger, and there are so many different ways. Kids are just amazing. How much, you'll be surprised how much do they know about their own feelings. So when the kids are, you help the kids make the connection between their behavior, all cognitive stuff, right? Between the behavior, their thoughts, and their feelings. So when the kid says, I want to hit you so bad, or starts moving, and you can pause and say, what's happening right now? So help them. It's the mindfulness that is really, mindfulness works for everybody, all of us, but for kids also. So what the kids will be able to say, I just want to hit this person, or I just want to break everything. Okay, so you kind of start following that, what the kid is telling you, and teach them, show them feeling words, show them pictures, show them this movie. Say, okay, so is there another way you can let us know? Can you use your words, or can you draw it?
Right.
Or show it in your body. Kids are very good about, one of my clients, he says, I feel it, I want to hit somebody, so I feel it in my fists, and he would show me his fists. That's where he feels the anger. So be able to help these kids make that connection, that when you feel like your fists are going very tight and you want to hit somebody, that means, what are you really feeling? So he will be able to use that word to connect the feeling to the state of mind or the state of body. So you're giving them a vocabulary.
So, specifically, some of these questions are similar. So I'm going to try to clump them together. So we talked about the best way to address. So what about like physical aggression in children, especially if it's geared to elders and parents?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first of all, I hope I'm not going off track, but we have...
Role modeling is extremely important.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Like I had to say that. What they are doing, have they seen it? Have they seen it at home or in the movies or somewhere around them? Where did they pick this behavior of physical aggression? We have a lot of violence in our culture
Of course.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So role modeling is basically about how what did we see growing up, because we idealize our parents and elders in the family, especially the ones who live in in the same household, and what we do, we adapt these values, specific sets of behaviors, just by looking at how they have done it, and that becomes our standard protocol or choice of behaviors in such situations. So yes, it is very likely somebody who grew up in a home with domestic violence would probably practice the same approach, dealing with his family, kids, whatnot. That's one thing. Another thing I was talking about was it might sound like a little bit irrelevant, but I think it is, because I think one thing that has um, become very obvious over time with more and more research is the food that kids are taking, and that's not
Yeah.
only hyperactivity, anger, attention deficit, all these things. So I think that is something we
A
need to
lot of
look into, because kids are getting so much genetically modified food, all the sugar content and all that. I mean, that's a whole different area. So I would say somebody who practices functional medicine would be a good doctor, a pediatrician, for kids who seem not to have a grip on their anger. So that's this added,
also.
layer of treatment.
Yeah.
So the
Now,
sugar and also the no tolerance policy. The home should have a policy of no physical aggression. So when you already instill that there is no tolerance for physical
Yes.
aggression, so immediately you stop the child, and if they don't, there could be consequences like a timeout or something. But in that timeout they can think. Timeout is not a punishment. If I'm talking about a very small child, right? And you're not able to control the aggression, one of that could be, you have the child, because time you remove them from the situation, but in that time they can think about their behavior, or you give them a paper and color and colors, and they can draw or something. They need to think about the behavior, like why they did it, so
All
that
right.
it's not just a punishment, it's a way to de-escalate but also think through, and then you should process it
To
with
help
the
them
child.
understand what anger is and where it's coming from, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah.
so for children, adults, adolescents, teenagers, all of us, in this current time where we're in this COVID-19 pandemic,
Wow.
everybody's world has been turned upside down, right? There's no, like, what we did rely on, what kept us straight, our routines and schedules no longer exist, because our scheduled activities that are outside our home are no longer happening. We are now schooling from home. Not only are our kids schooling from home, we become, as adults, we're not only teachers, we become teachers, we're parents, we're spouses, we're employees or employers. All these things are happening all at once in one household.
Yes.
Right.
So even people who, are normally not feeling and grief and anxiety in this situation do, and that can escalate to anger. So in these situations that are more apt to cause anger, where you would not normally face that, what can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Grief is such a big thing. We are in a process, we are all grieving different levels. Grief and loss go together, because of the losses. What have we lost? We have lost our routines, we may have lost our jobs. There's also a lot of anticipatory losses, because we are so, we don't know a lot, because we don't know the answers to so many things. Are we how the economy is going to be, how our jobs are going to be, are we going to lose money? So even when we go back to our normal real lives, what would be the aftershocks, I would call it, of this huge crisis that has happened? So we're all going through this loss, going through this grief, and we are feeling so out of control.
Right.
And grief is not a linear process. Grief has its own stages. The stages of grief are shock, denial, anger, depression, bargaining. And it's not in that order either. It could be a roller coaster, or we could be stuck in one stage, not go to the other. So anger is very much a part of grief. And as we were talking about, right now, this out of control
Situation, yeah.
situation. So do whatever you can within your realm of control, which is getting narrower and narrower. But even within that, what can you do to exercise your choices? That's a big thing.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to where we were talking about the coping strategies again, right? So even amongst this strange stance, we can still try to implement these routines, create venues for escape, right? Through creative or reading or visual means. Like for my children, at least for one of my children, she paid to kind of help her focus and clear her mind. She taught herself how to knit. So something that's both physical, especially for a child, right? And she's of the elementary school age, that she can do physically. Her mind is engaged. It's a kind of a creative escape.
Yes.
Physical exercise, I think is a big one that we can kind of do in our homes, or even just go for a walk outside in a safe manner without, interaction with others. Go ahead.
If you have a gym at home, I'm in the basement or wherever, it gives you an outlet for all that pent up energy, and it's not positive, it's negative energy. So if you release it one way or the other, by exercise, whatnot, it does bring a lot of, calmness to you. Also, one thing I would like to say is something that is, Yasmeen was talking about mindfulness, and I think this part of it is reflection, which means we should try to, if we stay zoomed in and focused at poor me, oh my God, what's happening here? I cannot see my friends. I'm at the verge of losing my job, whatever it is. It's going to just take us on a downward spiral. So I think it's always good to look at the perspective and bigger picture and see, and it ties into sabr and shukr. Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. I'm still safe. I could have been hooked up to a ventilator like hundreds of thousands of people. I'm not there. And inshallah, I will not get there. Things like that. I still have some food in my pantry, so I don't have to worry about where my next meal is coming from. So it's about putting things in perspective and see, in bigger scheme of things, this is where I stand, and this is a pretty good situation to be in spite of all the bad things going around.
Yes, and also awareness. It's okay to accept that we are sad.
Yeah, acceptance is good.
Normal,
it has to be there.
Accept that we are stressed, accept that we are worrying. That is very important, because sometimes we tell ourselves, oh, I should not be angry, or I should not worry, or I should not feel sad. And that makes emotions are a window to your soul. They don't just go away.
Yeah.
So that acceptance and gratitude, I think, are a big piece of that. I have another question that's related, but I do want to say that we are at the 1 hour mark. If it's okay with you, doctors, I'd like for us to continue for another 10 minutes or so to take questions, because we have some, if that works for both of you.
Sure.
So now with Ramadan coming, right now, not only are we in this pandemic, we're sheltering in place, in a few days, Ramadan's coming, right? And a part of our fasting is not only just from food and water, it's also our temperament, being closer to God, becoming a better person. So one of these questions are, any recommendations for coping with anger during COVID-19 and Ramadan? Especially like if something like drinking water calms you down when feeling angry, other ways to get around that while fasting. I think he just wants you to say he can drink water, but.
And you know what? I was thinking about Ramadan also, Ramadan. Actually, hunger can make you angry. You're hungry because you feel so out of control, and you're hungry, and you may have a headache or something. So there is a chance. I was also thinking Ramadan is a period of self-reflection
and training.
And training. It is training. But also there is a very strong social element to Ramadan for us.
Not this year, though. Yeah.
This year is going to be very different. Can you imagine? I have never, ever experienced a Ramadan where there's no Taraweeh. Taraweeh is such a social, right?
And just gathering together every evening, in dua and in breaking fast together, all those things we do as a community, going to be taken away from us this year.
It's going to be very different. So be aware of that. And also, what is the reason? what's helping me cope is that keep reminding myself what is the real reason, what is my goal for Ramadan. Is it for self-reflection? Is it to improve myself? The concept of tafakkur and tadabbur is
Yep.
in our religion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
So
go ahead, please.
what I was saying that, I mean, our religion, Alhamdulillah, provides us a whole code of conduct and behavior. And I think Ramadan is definitely, a time for purification of soul and body both. So I think that's also, if we just stay focused at that, I mean, especially for adults, I don't expect that to be as effective for kids, but of course they can benefit depending on how they're guided and trained. But for adults, we know that this is the time when we hit the reset button on a lot of things. We look at ourselves, we look at greed, look at backbiting, look at sweating and all those basic, very simple things that we are really ignore. We're ignorant of those things in other days, but this is the time when we have to kind of just retrain ourselves. And so I think that also anger is, we cannot leave anger out of that. Anger is definitely part of this whole training ourselves through this whole thing. But this,
So a good time to start resolutions with, the soul cleansing you're doing anyway, and fasting and creating those similar type of resolutions for your
yeah, the
behavior.
common denominator is self-control. That's
Yeah.
behind anger, that's behind thirst, that's behind everything else. So that's behind anger as well, and hunger and thirst, because it's about self-control. So that is, I think, it's something that permeates into how we manage anger better. So that is something that is kind of built in to our, routine in Ramadan as well. But it's going to be very clear that this Ramadan is going to be tougher, much tougher
yeah, it's
on
challenging.
everybody, because there's no social aspect of it. A lot of things are just still there, and the reality is grim, sadly. So, but it is
Yeah.
there.
So maybe, creating these new routines in Ramadan that kind of give you predictability
Right.
could be
Yeah.
helpful. We have a question. Is frustration a minor manifestation of anger?
Absolutely. Frustration, resentment, disappointment, hurt, you name it. There's so many
The precursors, yeah.
feelings that are underneath the anger. Again,
It's a
it's
warning
all
sign, because I think that's where people who get frustrated, if we are mindful, we know that's going to lead us into anger, and
if
that's where
it's
we can,
prolonged,
yeah,
right?
but we can block it. That's the opportunity to prevent ourselves from getting angrier. So just when you're frustrated, that's the first red flag for us, and we can divert it, dodge it, or even block it.
No, deal with it.
No,
What is
sometimes it's, as I'm saying, that
Mhm.
instead of getting sucked into anger, we
Yeah,
can be mindful that we're
yeah,
getting there now. So we have like heads up about, okay, this is
yeah.
what's coming, to us.
So awareness is very important.
Yeah. This question is, sometimes trying to control my anger can make me more angry. Any solutions? I like that one.
See, that's what we were talking about. Controlling anger could be suppressing anger. You don't control your anger, you can manage your anger. You get to the underlying emotion, figure out what is bringing this awareness. I keep talking about awareness. See the connection. What is it that is making me angry right now? Am I frustrated about something? Is it something prolonged? Is there a pattern? So what is triggering it? So look for triggers, look for patterns, and then that will help you get to the root cause and then address that. If it's another person, or
Yeah.
if it's with you, or is it a situation, what is causing it?
Yeah, and I'm just going to tie into what she's saying, that suppressing my anger makes me even angrier. It's because to me, it just multiplies our experience of helplessness
Uh,
exponentially, because I can try to not to get angry, and I'm trying to suppress it, but it's not working. I'm getting even angrier. So that to me is the height of like feeling helpless. And I think that's exactly what she was saying, in a way that we need to see what exactly, making me feel so helpless. Because if it's expressed assertively, it can be resolved in a much better manner than either by suppressing or acting out.
Okay, so I have two questions that are related. So I'm going to kind of read through both of them.
Yeah.
Adults fighting or arguing in front of young children, can it be a cause of long-term psychological damage? And then related, if a person has been brought up in an aggressive, angry childhood, how can that person be normalized? Does it become a part of his or her personality? So the first is arguing in front of the young children. And the second is if that's become ingrained, how do
Growing
you?
up with that kind of
Yeah,
experience,
so
yeah.
that as if we were talking about the learned behaviors. So the child is learning that this is the way that grown-ups cope when they are upset. They yell, they scream, whatever. So you're arguing. So of course, and it may instill fear in a child. And besides fear, it's also the child is learning this is how, because we are role modeling, this is how you deal when you are in
Yeah.
XYZ situation.
Can I add something to it?
Yes, yes.
As parents, we have so much power over kids. We normalize anything and everything we do, even if it's wrong. For example, one of my 12-year client, a boy, told me, heroin cannot be all that bad because my dad sits on the kitchen table and does heroin in front of me almost every night. I'm just saying that the kid's perception is very different. He's looking at it maybe a normal behavior because if my dad is doing it, it's got to be okay. So just like that, if my dad is angry and breaking objects or hitting my mom, that's going to be okay. So unfortunately, these are the things where people down the line would definitely benefit from professional help because we cannot just manage everything ourselves and handle everything ourselves. Some of us can, that's great. But the majority of people would certainly benefit from seeking professional help because this could be a damaging thing that would hurt them for the rest of their lives.
I want to address the, thank you, Asif, and I want to address the next question. So if so somebody asked if you have grown up with that
Yeah.
and this is what you've seen, now you're an adult, what do you do? So would that justify how you behave towards others? No, you can still become, so that awareness again is very important, that you are able to see, oh, I grew up with this, and then anger is like a very adaptive for me, it's a learned behavior for me. But again, if I can identify that, that means I can change that.
Yes.
And again, get to the thoughts and see if you are doing, figure out the thoughts that are behind it, and see if you can change
Yeah.
those thoughts, because the thoughts could be irrational, illogical, like black and white thinking,
Yeah. I want to
or labeling or blaming, or
just
yeah.
make one comment about it. I've had adult patients in their 40s and 50s, and they came in for one simple reason. They told me they grew up in a household with a lot of anger and violence, and sometimes even. And they told me that it has made me a bitter person or an angry person. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to live my life like that. That's why they came to my office, and so sometimes it is okay to seek professional help because yes, it's something that has lifelong impact.
Dr. Yasmeen Khan and Dr. Asif Khan, I cannot thank both of you enough for sharing both your time and expertise in both preparing for and conducting this workshop. I think it has been of a great benefit to the community, and we'll be sharing this, but we are so grateful that you were able to give your time and expertise to all of us and share your profession with us as well.
All
Thank you
right.
for having us.
And thank you so much for doing such a great job. And I would like to thank all the audience and people who were there, participated, and thank you all for all the wonderful questions. We would love to get some feedback whenever it's possible, for you guys to do
Yeah,
that.
so for those of you who are on the Zoom, we will send a follow-up email. We'll send you a short survey if you could give us some feedback on this session, along with a recording of the seminar. So if you want to look back at the slides or go back to any of the information and questions that were placed today. So, and it's also going to be on the Bethel Elm YouTube site as well, which is playing live there right now. Okay, with that, we will conclude. Thank you, everybody. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy. And
Hina,
yes.
do you want to share the resource page?
Oh, yes, let's do that. Thank you for reminding me. Before we do get off, if you all would like to see, I can show you on the Beit Elm website. Give me a second to pull that up. I'll show you where we have additional resources to help you during these challenging times. Many of us are going through a lot of different things, and I believe you can see the Beit Elm homepage right now. If you look here, there's a COVID-19 resources page, and when you go there, there is the Community Relief Fund, and underneath that, we have a resource list for medical, legal, economic, and spiritual needs during this time.
Excellent. Yeah.
And in there, you have to click a few more times, there's this resource list. And in this resource, we have medical resources. And for mental health, you can actually just click on the tips to manage anxiety, stress. Same thing with safety and well-being. We have some resources for you there. Legal assistance, if there's many things available right now during this time. Economic, if unemployment issues, tax refund, if you have a small business, what to do there. As well as we have some spiritual resources, ayahs of the Quran, giving sadaqah, different du'as that can help going through what is. It truly is. Predictability is gone. Our lives have changed. But alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, we have gratitude for what we do have. We try to make the best in the situation. God only gives us these challenges because he knows we are strong enough to handle them. And with that, I'm going to recite a salawat and conclude this session. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
All right, thank you so much.